The content you're about to hear may be graphic in nature. Listener discretion is advised.
Oh, how I wonder what it's like to relax. See the sky down under. Hope my plans collapse. Oh, how I'm under the surface of my tears, falling down asunder the meaning of my years.
This is True Crime XS.
We've gone down this like rabbit hole with this dirty badge stuff, and I had a couple of more stories in that vein that I wanted to touch on before we sort of wrapped up the introduction of it. And that's really all this is. These episodes were like an introduction to see kind of how they performed and kind of how you and I felt about them. I do have a piece of true crime news I wanted to put in today because it's like one of the weirdest things that I've been able to look at. I got it out of Fox 8 Live, which I believe is the local channel. They also had it at KPLC, which I remember as KPLC being number 7. So I don't know for sure if this is all local to the area that it's from, but I know that Fox 8 is from the Gulf Coast somewhere. They had a September 10th, 2025 thing that they put out from their digital team, which is kind of everybody contributes. It says burglary suspect fraudulently released for 2 months. And this is from Kakassu Paris Sheriff's Office. This guy is so ahead of the game. He's a 42-year-old man. This is out of Lake Charles, Louisiana. It says a correctional center inmate was erroneously released after a man pretended to be a judge and had his bond reduced. And I have to tell you, it takes a serious amount of
cojones.
Yeah, balls, cojones, chutzpah, to call up and pretend to be a judge to the local jail.
Or it takes none at all. It takes an
It
idiot.
could be that too. It could be that too, yeah. So it says Adrian James St. Romain is the guy's name. He's 42 years old. It says he called the jail on April the 16th and impersonated a judge. And he had Demond Lynn Delahouse Sr.'s bond changed down to released on recognizance. This is according to the local sheriff down there. Their spokesperson, Kayla Vincent, contributes to this article. But basically, Demond was facing an aggravated burglary charge. He gets released in June on this bond. So when Demond ends up appearing in court on July 17th, somebody, and I'm guessing it's a clerk, they discovered he had been released under false pretenses. So he gets booked back into the jail, according to Kayla Vincent. And then St. Romain is called out on all this. He reportedly had called the jail 2 more times in July, and he tried to set another bond for Demond. He was not successful. So detectives began investigating these suspicious calls in July, and they identify Adrian James St. Romain as the caller. Deputies end up arresting him in early September with the help of the U.S. Marshals Service on a separate matter. So after talking to the deputies, he gets booked into the local jail on the first warrant, as well as attempted simple escape, assisting escape, injuring public records, and false impersonations. Now, when I looked at this, the bond had not yet been set for him, but it said that Kayla Vincent said it was not unusual to have judges calling in to do bond reductions by phone, but they had protocols they had to follow. And she wouldn't provide further details for this article because she didn't want everybody to know the security protocols. But she said, we have policies in place and we've had to make changes to ensure this type of situation doesn't happen again. Then the sheriff down there, Stitch Guillory, he says this was an honest error that occurred due to lack of training. We've addressed it. We did not release any information in July once it was discovered due to the fact that our detectives and the corrections personnel were in the middle of an active investigation. And if we'd revealed these details too soon, we could have tipped off the suspect. He said, I want to commend our detectives, corrections deputies, and the CPSO Real-Time Crime Center for the work they did using multiple law enforcement tools and techniques to connect the dots and identify the suspect responsible. I remain committed to being transparent with our community and those we serve, even when situations like this occur. That's all the sheriff talking. But then they close the article out. They say this investigation is ongoing. And I'm like, wait, but if it was ongoing, you wouldn't comment on it, right?
Yeah, no, the investigation's over. And if the positive U reinforcement that was taken in the statement,
Right.
because, actually, I'm not entirely sure how much interaction there is. It depends on how rural it is, I guess, whether the corrections office has anything even to do with the sheriff's department, right?
Right.
I mean, except that, like, the sheriff arrests the people and the corrections officers make sure the people stay in the corrections facility, right?
Right.
So I'm not really sure, but
a lot of sheriffs run the local jail, by the way, the local detention center. Yeah.
And that's what I was thinking, but I don't have any idea actually, sort of statistically how many corrections officers are sworn officers versus not or whatever. And
I got you.
I'm just saying, like, he praised the work in finding the person who did it and, arresting them. But, like, it seemed like that was a serious error.
It's really serious, but it's not just a serious error. Like, it's a complicated plot to do something like that. Like, for that guy to have the wherewithal to call up. So he had to have figured out some of the security protocols. Not all of them, according to what they're doing, but they're saying they changed some of the way they did it.
Well, right, because somebody didn't know the difference. And I would imagine, like, they had to have some insider information, right?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Or they'd been booked and they'd heard it happen, so they knew a piece of it and started looking into it. Something like that, yeah.
Right, and, I think it's interesting because really, now this would have been in favor of the inmate because of it, like, whatever the bond was changed to a signature, right?
Yeah, a written promise to appear, basically.
Right. And so that would be in favor of the inmate. But, all the actions that occur with regard to someone being held for trial, it's supposed to occur in open court, right?
For the most part, so I think what they're referencing there is probably the thing happens in court in terms of the motion, the argument, both attorneys are heard, nothing is ex parte, the judge hears it. I think what they're referencing is that after that happens in open court, the clerk or the judge's office, depending on how it's set up, will call over and relay some of that. Where I work, it's all done electronically, and it takes about 12 hours to see everything accurately, but the judge may call over in the meantime, or we may call and say, hey, this change occurred. Sometimes even the DA's office will call and say, hey, this change occurred. So there are certain things you have to do. I just realized I should say none of those, just in case. But like, once you do that, the information it's typically like triple verified where I am. Like, if the defender's office calls and says something, then whoever takes that message will talk to the magistrate, who will call the judge's office, or they will talk to the supervisor at the detention center, and the detention center will talk to the DA's office. So there's multiple things that can happen where it's not actually the reduction of the bond occurring at the jail. It's the reporting that it's been reduced in court that's occurring.
Right. And so it was discovered, I assume, because, like, the clerk's office is expecting somebody that's being held to show up, like, via jail transport, right?
Right.
But they don't, because they're not in jail.
Right.
And then they're like, what the heck? But I don't know if he showed up otherwise.
And he showed up in court and got arrested, basically.
Well, I was going to say, but it's not necessarily his fault. I mean, so did he get charged? Did the erroneously released defendant get charged?
He gets pulled back into jail, basically,
not
under
charged,
the original
though.
conditions. Right. Like, he's not charged for it. The other person is charged for it.
Okay.
There could potentially be a moment where they realize he's in on it all, and he
I
gets
don't know.
charged with escape. Simple
Well, and
escape, not
I
compromise.
would fight that because, like, in theory, when you are in jail, you have little access to anything that anybody's not telling you, right? I mean, because
100%.
and so he would just, I mean, he may have found out, like, oh, his buddy called, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, is he gonna like argue with them about it when they're like, hey, you can sign yourself out now? I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but so I'd be interested to know. This seems to have been caught like pretty logically as far as, the clerk saying, oh, this person's supposed to be in custody and they're not, right?
Right.
So I wonder, though, has it happened otherwise?
At this place?
Well, yeah, like, has he done? Because, I mean, if that was his first shot and it was successful, I mean, that's crazy.
Well, there's a couple of charges here that make me think maybe it was maybe a subsequent action. I'm not sure. Like, it's almost like they're charging him with potentially having attempted to do this before, like the same guy, Adrian. He seems to be the one they focus on, not Demond. Demond is the person who gets ultimately let out. I don't know how that's going to shake out. I just found it interesting. Like, I've seen mistakes happen before, and I have a case that is in a neighboring jurisdiction of impersonation of a bondsman, which was fascinating to me. But it essentially was someone pulls up to the jail. I think it was a drug trafficking scenario. In my opinion, none of that is like, it's all speculation, but whatever. I think they go to basically get their runner out of jail, and they pretend to be a bondsman. And from what I've seen in that instance, like, they have the correct book of like the insurance stuff. It's almost like they're impersonating another person who maybe is unaware that it's happening. Like, they've stolen some items to impersonate a bondsman, but I've never seen somebody impersonate a judge like this over the phone. That's so interesting to me.
It really is, because it's somebody who's either just not smart at all, or it's somebody that's actually, I think it's probably just somebody who has nothing to lose. I mean, honestly,
Right.
because otherwise, why? He doesn't even benefit from it, right?
Yeah, I don't know what the scenario is here as to why he's doing it. It's actually quite strange to me that this is happening at all.
It is. It shouldn't happen. I would say that any attempt such as this would be immediately and permanently thwarted, right?
Yeah. Today we have kind of a theme, a little bit. The theme, which is why I brought up this piece of true crime news, it's a little bit about escape. And so I had like another piece I want to put in here that happened it happened over the summer, but it's part of the Dirty Badges series, but it's not going to be his whole story today. It's just going to be a piece of it. And it's going to lead into something else. And when this happened, I'm pretty sure like I messaged you about it like the moment I heard about it. There's a documentary about like this overall case. I have never watched that documentary, and I've not heard the entire story yet, so I've just started sort of researching it. But had you ever heard of a police chief named Grant Hardin?
Not before we started looking into it.
Okay, so this guy is interesting for a number of reasons. He's apparently the subject of a documentary called Devil in the Ozarks. And in May of this year, so a couple months back, he managed to escape. May 25th, this guy, he's 56 years old. He escapes from the North Central Unit in Calico Rock, Arkansas. He had been serving time there for the 2017 murder of a man named James Appleton and the 1997 rape of a school teacher. That's according to the public records at the Arkansas Department of Corrections.
I think I did know about that. I may have known a little bit about this before we started looking into it. But
Like,
go ahead.
but it would have. I think it would have been from the perspective of the DNA, maybe.
I think so, because it was crazy.
Right. It was wild, like kind of who he was. So Grant Hardin's a former police chief, like just to get that out there and say it up front. He had been sentenced to about 80 years on the convictions for this murder and the rape of the school teacher. According to Nathan Smith, who is the Benton County prosecutor at some point in time, I don't know if he's from that time period. It just said former on a couple of the sources. The affiliate for ABC out in Arkansas is KHBS or KHOG. USA Today carried some of their stuff. And this is what Nathan Smith had to say. Again, this is the former prosecutor, not the current one. He said he's a sociopath. Prison's not full of people who are all bad. It's full of a lot of people who just do bad things. But Grant is different. So USA Today gets into it a little more. They say that Hardin pleaded guilty in 2017 to murder in the first degree for having shot and killed Mr. Appleton in February of 2017. According to his brother-in-law, Andrew Tillman, this is him talking to the Benton County Sheriff's investigators. He says he was on the phone with James Appleton when James Appleton got shot. So James Appleton's brother-in-law is Andrew Tillman. He is on the phone listening to this shooting. James Appleton, for his part, had filed a police complaint shortly before the phone call. And he had pulled over to the side of the road to complete this conversation with Andrew Tillman. That's according to an affidavit that's filed as probable cause affidavit. It was noted that while they're talking, James says to Andrew, a car just sped by me. He said, I think it must have been a cop or something. So according to Andrew Tillman, the next thing he heard on the phone was what sounded like a loud slamming door, and that was it. A witness told investigators that he saw a white car parked behind Appleton's truck, heard a loud bang, and saw the white car speed off. The witness then turned around to check on the truck, only to discover that James Appleton was dead. That is always absolutely horrible, by the way, to walk up on someone who's just been shot. Andrew Tillman was the mayor of Gateway, Arkansas, when this shooting had occurred. His wife, Cheryl Tillman, is currently the town's mayor. According to Cheryl, she told the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, which also ran the USA Today article, he's just an evil man and he's no good for society. USA Today reached out to them for comment. They did not comment back immediately, so they just ran with the additional quotes from the other sources. Now, he gets 30 years in prison for a plea agreement on this, and a DNA test follows up this murder conviction. And it links him back to a Rogers, Arkansas 1997 rape. That victim told investigators she was attacked on a Sunday morning, a time where she was normally working to prepare for her week. And she noted that there was a church group meeting in the school's cafeteria while she's working. After leaving her classroom to go to a restroom off of the teacher's lounge, she was attacked at gunpoint. The assailant was described as a white male wearing a knit stocking cap and sunglasses. This information ends up coming from an application for a search warrant that's filed for a storage unit owned by Grant Hardin. So in 2019, Grant Hardin ends up pleading guilty to 2 counts of rape, and he's sentenced to 25 years in prison for each count, and it's to be served consecutively, so back to back. According to USA Today, and I think the Associated Press ran with this as well, he had bounced around between police departments before he became the chief of police in Gateway, Arkansas. He had been with the Fayetteville Police Department from August of 1990 to May of 1991. The department's chief of police had said that he terminated Grant Hardin because his efforts fell short of the average probationary officer. So when you start being a police officer, there's a period of time that you can be let go, basically. Usually it's about a year. Some places it's 2 years. You're considered to be a probationary employee. But the police chief from back then said that he had a tendency to not accept constructive criticism along with indecisiveness in stressful situations. So from there, he ends up at, for sure, Eureka Springs Police Department from April of 1993 to October of 1996. But he had a lot in his record there. Multiple excessive uses of force, poor decisions on the job, and that department's former police chief just said it didn't work out. He ends up being the chief of police for Gateway for about 4 months at the beginning of 2016. Now, this Devil in the Ozarks documentary that exists, it focuses mainly on the 1997 unsolved rape. So it ends up being released, I think, in 2023. And if I recall correctly, it's on either HBO or Max, whatever they call it now. But the tagline that I found on IMDb said that it's about a vicious sexual assault stunning a small town, going unsolved for 2 decades until a murder nearby reveals a suspect with matching DNA. I haven't seen the documentary yet. I do plan on watching it now. But I wanted to bring up Grant Hardin because it's not every day that you hear about a police chief serving time for rape and murder escaping from prison.
There are always like too many examples of situations where a police officer didn't work out for cause, right? Like there's a reason they didn't work out. But it's almost like the not working out isn't quantified enough for the next police agency not to hire them.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
That's what I was thinking because and I think that this is a good example of like how bad it really is when you are talking about like certain situations. Like I would say police, because they have, a gun and a badge and an authority and possibly power, depending. It's odd. It doesn't make logical sense for somebody that didn't work out as a probationary officer to like 20 years later be the chief of anything, right?
Yeah.
And like there's other professions, like, if a doctor really messes up and they get fired, but the hospital doesn't notate what the problem was with some sort of possible legal action or something, like they can get hired at the next place, right? And do the same stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so it's dangerous, right? And this is a perfect illustration of that. I haven't seen the documentary either yet, but I'm totally going to watch it now. And I was trying to think, like, there's so many elements that are sparking memories for me in this, like, kind of the narrative of what all happened, right?
Yeah.
Did you say that Appleton filed a complaint?
Yeah, so there was a complaint that had been made against the police, and then so we've got multiple residents of Gateway, Arkansas involved, which is where Hardin is the chief of police. So he had filed some kind of complaint, probably against him, and he comes on board and he shoots him. I assume that might get answered in the documentary, which is why I wasn't going to dig deep into it here because I don't know. But,
right. And so I'm going to see, but I remember, so, not getting like that heavy into it because we don't know all the details. But if you think about the solution of a complaint being, now, was he chief at that time?
Yeah.
Being you go shoot the complainant, like there's going to be a lot of garbage.
Oh, yeah.
Backing up that whole situation, right? And again, we'll figure this out because we'll look into it. But it's interesting. It's noted. I'm sure it's for a reason that it's noted. The documentary happened before he escaped, right?
The documentary is from 2023. He escapes in 2025. So yes.
Okay. It's interesting that the notes existed somewhere, or the person who wrote the article got quotes, so they existed, right?
Yes.
As far as him saying that he couldn't make good decisions under pressure and whatever else they said.
Yeah.
It completely contravenes like what ends up happening later, right?
Yes.
And that's interesting to me because I do think a police officer, I don't know about you. I would never be a law enforcement officer. I have no interest in like I don't follow orders, right? So I wouldn't be a good one. But it's always, we know that a lot of violent criminals have aspirations or even been some sort of law enforcement, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it makes it like that much more sickening, right?
Definitely does.
Because you think about like, wow, that's crazy that he was able to, because if he's doing, he's raping somebody in 97 and then he's police chief in 2016, like what kind of spiraling life is that? It's scary to me, right?
It is very scary, yes. It's not only scary, it's a little bit ridiculous. And that's one of the things in some of the later episodes of the whole Dirty Badges thing, we're going to get into some pretty bizarre things that have happened with how police agencies are staffed around the country. You brought up an interesting point, and that was like a lot of times when an officer is let go early in their career, the way that they're let go doesn't preclude them from becoming an officer at another agency.
And I feel like I feel like that's what exactly should happen, right? Unless it's literally just being let go because of like overstaffing or something, which it hardly ever is, okay? Because you don't let good cops go. Like you want to hold on to them because they're so few and far between, right?
Right.
But when you're talking about like the bad cops ending up being the chiefs, well, I mean, none of what should be happening is happening, right? Because the chief is who should weed out the bad cops, right?
Right.
And you've got something completely backwards there. But there is this, my understanding, never having been a police officer or any desire to be in law enforcement whatsoever, is that they still look out for each other. And in not, saying this guy is completely incompetent to continue to have a career in law enforcement when they let him go, like that's just part of the brotherhood, right?
Yeah.
Like they're not going to completely ruin him. They just don't want to deal with his shenanigans at their agency, right?
Right.
When in theory they should have said, we're not going to give him a recommendation. I don't know how much that would actually matter, right?
Right.
It seems like, but I think if not giving a recommendation versus actually saying like this guy is bad news, I do think that would make a difference.
Yeah, there's certain things like I'm probably straddling the fence here. I don't know how you deal with people like that. Like from the perspective of you can't know what he's doing in the future, but the truth is he should have been caught for that rape a long time ago. DNA testing would have done that early on. Just saying.
Well, right, because it, how the story unfolds, it's the DNA that got him eventually.
Right. Whereas, like, we maybe could have done that all along. I mean, I don't know that, like, signing up as a police officer, maybe it should be that your DNA is kept because of the propensity for officers to commit crimes like this, but also just from the perspective of contaminated crime scenes, which brings up another wrinkle because then that could have been written off if he happened to be a police officer at that time in that area,
Well, right, but there's no reason that his semen should be found in a rape kit.
Well, I wasn't going to take it quite that far. I was just saying from the perspective of the overall people. But yes, you're right, 100%. That would have solved that and prevented James Appleton's shooting.
And that's just what we know.
Right. So he gets out May 25th. The way that he gets out, have you heard about this? Like what he does?
He escapes, right?
Yeah, his escape is he basically manages to cobble together a uniform that looks similar to what the officers at the corrections facility he's at look like. So he literally just walks up to a front gate with a hat and this thing that looks like a uniform on, and a prison guard, presses a button, opens the secure fence, and Grant Hardin walks out. And he literally is able to walk out into the nearby woods. Now, he's not out for very long. They bring in BORTAC. Have you ever heard of BORTAC?
Is that an acronym for something?
It's the Border Patrol Tactical Unit.
Yes. Okay.
They call them BORTAC. They're like they're getting popular. They're out of Fort Bliss, I think, which would be El Paso, Texas. But they bring in part of that team to look for him. They find him, I think it's June 7th, based on what I've seen. It's either June 6th or 7th. They are able to find him. He's still in the wilderness. Basically, one of the law enforcement officers with Vortec walks up on him in the woods. And once he spots him, he's like apparently laying down or sitting down. He's muddy. He has no shirt on. And he's trying to figure out like what's going to happen. And Grant Hardin runs. So the agent literally has to run him down. And Hardin slips and he grabs him. So he's not out there for very long. I did think it was interesting they brought in the Vortec unit because weirdly enough, that's also going to come up later in Dirty Badges because some of these elite units or quote elite units, some of them really are elite and some of them are questionable. But Vortec, this particular unit is the unit that would have been on site for the Robb Elementary School shooting in Uvalde, Texas back in 2022. They're credited with having shot the gunman, even though it's just a couple of members there. But that's a whole different thing. You can find pictures of them like after they catch Grant Hardin, and they're pretty sad. Like he's definitely very muddy and topless. Just sitting
and he was out for 12 days, right?
Yeah, essentially he's out from the 25th through the 6th or 7th. Yeah, right at 12 days.
Right. And so that's not going to be part of the documentary, right? Because it happened later.
No, it's not going to be in there. Not the escape, but like the other part where he gets convicted of murder and then that links him to the rape. That's what's going to be in the documentary Devil in the Ozarks.
I see. Okay. And so, I'm rationalizing things here. He's at a certain point in life where some things are what they are, right? Because he's got, an 80-year sentence or something. He's never getting out, right?
Yeah, now he's going to have an escape on top of that.
When you're sitting there in the woods, I guess, muddy.
Yeah.
And, I know he looked thin, like he hadn't eaten very much because he wasn't getting any assistance, right? I imagine this was big news everywhere, right?
Yeah.
And so it's not like he had anywhere to go. And so like you're rationalizing like, well, is jail really that bad? Is prison really that bad compared to like, living in the mud? You have to kind of wonder, we don't see a whole lot of escapes anymore. Now this kind of, I don't know, it kind of bites me in the ass a little bit, but this isn't a typical thing when you have a police chief, a former police chief who would have a certain amount of confidence that I don't think your normal everyday inmate probably has, right?
Right.
As far as him putting on, a makeshift outfit that made it look like he wasn't an inmate. It looked like he was a corrections officer. And they let him out, right? Because he looked like a corrections officer. That's my understanding of what happened anyway. And so it wasn't an escape like anything. It was plotted, but I'm saying he didn't go through the vent shaft. He walked out because somebody was confused and didn't understand that he was an inmate, right?
Right.
And so that's, probably the dumbest way anybody ever escaped, right?
Yeah.
And, if I had been the person who opened the gate for him, I would resign because I'm not good at that job. Right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't completely undermine my thought on, because part of my argument on what I don't care whether people get put to death or not is like, they're not going to escape. Right.
Yes.
And then we got this. So I'm just saying it's a different kind of escape. Right.
Right. Well,
you couldn't have gotten out otherwise.
Yeah. And it's funny that you said that. The way that you said all of that is funny because we've got the Devil in the Ozarks movie. I think that's the rabbit hole to go down next. I may dig more into this and Grant Hardin may be a future Dirty Badges episode because I tend to look at people that have clearly committed these two crimes that are 20 years apart. Okay. Like the the
Yeah,
sexual
they're
assault.
really different too.
They're very different crimes. And then I go, well, what happened in between? Because I want to know, like, what was he doing between 1997 and 2017?
So I'm sure this is going to be covered in the documentary that I'm going to watch probably when we get done recording this, because now I want to know. I have a feeling it could be nothing, right? He could have done nothing in between those two times. But I have a feeling in his sociopathic, psychopathic brain, he justified the shooting for some reason, right?
Oh, 100%.
And the other thing I think about is, well, if he was, because the rape victim survived.
Correct.
He didn't kill her; she lived, and the evidence was put into CODIS. And unless he was in a lot of different areas, that leads me to think, well, they're putting the evidence of sexual assaults that are unsolved in CODIS, and they would show up as a match, right? Just like that one did.
Right.
And so that's one part of it. But then
Missing
the
people
other,
in the area.
I'm sorry?
Missing people in the area.
Oh, well,
Is
you
it his
wonder
first
about that,
murder?
but also you wonder, like, how many females who survive a like stranger rape don't report it.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
And so those obviously nobody knows about them, and they're not going to be in CODIS, right?
Yeah, they're the hardest numbers to work with because they were never.
Yeah, because they don't exist at all. They're
Right.
just, it's some unknown quantity that happens. And it's actually like a really sad thought, right?
Yes.
But there did happen to be the one. And, then if he was, there's a lot of unknowns there. It's possible that for a variety of reasons, evidence left behind at a sexual assault wouldn't be in CODIS at this point. But he got away with it for a really long time. And it's hard to believe unless he just had like some special obsession with the one victim he was caught for, that getting away with a rape wouldn't empower a rapist to rape again.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what all might have happened with him. I'm interested. I don't have like a ton of information on him. He kind of came up in passing, and he has some similarities to like the main story. So I just brought him up here.
Well, and he did escape from prison for 12 days this year. Right.
Right. So he has a current, like, sort of a current entry in terms of like true crime news.
I can't remember if I think I only ever heard of him when he escaped.
Okay.
And I think that all the stuff came up, and I do think I'm not sure that the DNA would have been on my radar yet, but I think that once he escaped, and because it was a headline, right, for a little while, because they didn't find him immediately. 12 days isn't long, but it also is long, right?
Yeah.
If you're living it and you're in that, because he was a dangerous person. He was a violent criminal. And so it was in the news, and I know I remember it then, and I have questions, and I'm not sure if I got him answered or not. Probably about the time he would have been going back, having been caught by the Bortak. It probably would have been resolved, and I probably would have moved on, because that seems about right.
Yeah, so I brought this up to kind of segue, because there's a movie about this guy. He escapes. He was clearly a leader in law enforcement at some point, even though maybe he shouldn't have been. I brought that up to talk about like another news event that is Dirty Badge. Did you have anything else on Grant Hardin right now?
Not right now, no.
So that's, that guy's kind of isolated to where he is, but he is known as the devil in the Ozarks. There is a documentary on him. The other guy has a different kind of movie made about him, but he does have an interesting piece of news this year. We have to go back to December 12th of 1937 for him to be born. He's not going to be here that long. And the places that he lived don't have that many people. Like when he's born, he's living in Finger, Tennessee. Finger, Tennessee, for those of you who don't know, has a population of about 200 people. He is going to die in a place that has about 2,000 people, and that's a place called Adamsville. Now, the person that we're talking about is known for a lot of interesting things. But his name is Buford Pusser, and people know his name, but don't know as much about him as they think they do. He is the son of Helen Harris and Carl Pusser, and his father had been a police chief in this very small town, Adamsville, Tennessee. By all accounts, he's an athlete in high school. He's known for having played football and basketball. He grows to be very tall. Reports say that he was 6'6" tall. He was not. He was more like 6'3", but people gave him credit for his shoes. He wore heeled boots and kind of did the thing that The Rock does, where he makes himself up to be a lot bigger, which is fine. That's what people do, particularly when they're wrestlers. And weirdly enough, this guy was a wrestler. So he tried to go into the United States Marine Corps right as he graduated from high school, which he doesn't do long in the Marines. He ends up getting a medical discharge right at the end of boot camp for asthma. So in 1957, when he's 20 years old, he moves up to Chicago and he becomes a local wrestler known as Buford the Bull. He gets married in December of 1959 to Pauline Mullins. And the two of them don't stay in Chicago terribly long. He ends up coming home in 1962. In 1962, he becomes the police chief of Adamsville, Tennessee, this little tiny place. He is their constable as well for a period of time in this 3-year period, 1962, 1963, 1964. And he ends up in a weird position in August of 1964 when at 6:15 a.m., driving north on U.S. Highway 45, about a mile from the Mississippi-Tennessee border, the front right tire of a vehicle blows out and causes the vehicle to veer off the roadway, goes down an embankment, and it kills Sheriff James Dickey, who had been the sheriff of McNairy County. He was a World War II vet. He had been in the sheriff's office for 6 years. He had left behind a wife and 2 kids. But suddenly McNairy County needed a sheriff. So they bring in Buford Pusser. Now, Buford Pusser becomes the youngest sheriff in Tennessee's history. And he immediately tries to make a big name of himself, going after such fictional entities as the Dixie Mafia and the State Line Mob. And I say that because he's really just going after local ne'er-do-wells who are promoting gambling and gun running and prostitution at the time. Moonshine would have been a big deal back then. But ultimately, he's more in the way that wrestlers build a persona. He's building a persona more than he is being good law enforcement.
I feel like that's more common in law enforcement than we actually realize.
Yeah. But he does end up being kind of a local hero, mainly because he keeps pushing this story about the State Line Mob. For those of you who don't know much about the State Line Mob, it's an association of other groups of criminal elements that were said to have operated between the 1950s and the 1960s along the Mississippi-Tennessee state line. Mainly, they operated in Alcorn County, Mississippi, and McNairy County, Tennessee, so that's how they get the nickname.
Right, and it's also a way to condense a narrative of a cause for law enforcement.
It really is. It's a way for them to really focus in on a group of individuals they believe are organizing and together, although frequently they are not organized at all. They were known for bootlegging, gambling, prostitution, fleecing tourists, enrolling tourists, usually through the prostitution, robbery, murder. There were multiple members that came out of Phoenix City, Alabama, and they sort of get kicked out of there because at some point the Alabama gets sick of the people that are in these 3 or 4 groups and they kick them out with the Alabama National Guard trying to clean up the town, which is apropos of things happening today. But they had owned and operated multiple motels, restaurants, and clubs down there, and they just moved that operation up to the Mississippi-Tennessee state line. And they were just north of Corinth, Mississippi when they started doing this. They basically had establishments where you could get pretty much any vice you wanted, including a lot of illegal drugs. But the illegal drug trade back then was much smaller. The bulk of what they did was moving and fencing stolen items, firearms, and moonshine. But Buford Pusser focuses in on them, tells them to get out, just like Alabama had tried to do. He's married at this time, and he starts to build this legend for himself with this persona he's creating as having survived multiple assassination attempts. According to several news sites, New York Times talks about him. The Daily Corinthian, I think, is the paper down there. They talk about him surviving various assassination attempts. February 1st of 1966, so he'd been in office since August 1964. Louise Hathcock attempted to kill Pusser during an on-site investigation of a robbery complaint at a place called the Shamrock Motel. Hathcock apparently fired on Pusser with a concealed .38 pistol, and Buford Pusser returned fire and killed Hathcock. Then a year later, January 2nd, 1967, Buford Pusser was shot 3 times by an unidentified gunman. This story goes he had stopped a speeding automobile, and he ends up being shot. And he ends up being brought to sort of national attention later in the year, about 8 months later, when his wife, Pauline Mullins, she's killed on August 12th, 1967. So it's 3 years that he's been in office as McNairy County Sheriff, and his wife is murdered. So according to the story, Pauline Mullins Pusser was purportedly shot to death during an ambush that, if you believe Buford, was intended for him. And I mentioned Louise earlier, Louise Hathcock. And I just want to point out that the story that's told is that Louise Hathcock was living with a man who was considered to be her, common law husband, even though they weren't officially married. That person named Kirksey Nix. Have you ever heard of him?
Only, I think maybe a little bit to do with the Dixie Mafia, but
right,
mostly because of this story. Yeah.
Right. So this guy, X, is allegedly contracting or putting a hit out on Buford Pusser. Now, he's alleged to be part of the Dixie Mafia and whatever, but nobody ever gets charged with the murder of Pauline Mullins. December 25th, so Christmas 1968, Buford Pusser shoots and kills a man named Charles Russell Hamilton. And he comes to be there because Charles Hamilton's landlord has called the police and said that Charles threatened them with a gun. Now, he can't rerun for sheriff in 1970 because of term limits that are in effect. He comes back around to be the sheriff in 1972, but he loses. He blames this loss to a guy named Clifford Coleman as being kind of part of this, like, I guess you can make your legend or your personality or persona too big. Does that make sense? Like you can pop your own balloon, so to speak. Pop your own balloon, maybe.
Right, and he was causing controversy, right?
Right. So what's happened is Buford Pusser becomes this larger-than-life figure, and they base a story on him for this sort of action thriller movie called Walking Tall. For those of you who've never heard of it, he's played by Joe Don Baker in the movie. Joe Don Baker is known for playing like villains and good guys alike that are like big, tough dudes. This story is now apparently kind of fictional, but the idea was once his wife had been killed by these assassins meant for him, like he becomes popular and this biographical movie comes out about him. It's a huge deal. It is a great example of a persona or legend balloon getting too big. He does end up being able to be reelected in the middle of all this. He's going to serve as constable for 2 more years, 1970 and 1972, down in Adamsville. And that was through a write-in vote. But going back on all of this, that story from Walking Tall, which told up to the point that like his wife is killed, kind of, apparently that's been rewritten recently. So that's kind of what we wanted to talk about a little bit today, and that's why I tied the other escapes and stories to this one, because it appears that Buford Pusser might have gotten away with murder, doing his own kind of a different escape. So, according to Buford Pusser, August 12th, 1967, he gets a phone call, and it's about a disturbance that's happening kind of out in rural McNairy County on a place called New Hope Road. He says he'll go take care of it. His wife Pauline's going to ride along. According to this story, they passed the Methodist Church on New Hope Road, named New Hope Methodist Church, and a fast-moving car pulls up alongside them, and the occupants open fire. And they kill his wife, and they, quote, leave him for dead, end quote. According to doctors, he is struck on the left side of his jaw by 2 or possibly 3 rounds from a .30 caliber carbine weapon. So this is the M1 carbine is a weapon that the U.S. military used during World War II, Korea, Vietnam. It is been a mainstay in military weapons. So Pusser is going to go to the hospital. He's going to be there for almost 3 weeks. He's going to require quite a few surgeries to restore his appearance. And he does the thing that, you're supposed to do when your wife has been assassinated and you're this big persona, and he swears and vows and declares that he is going to bring his wife's murderers to justice. He is never actually able to get Nix on any of this or any of the other people that are accused to have been a part of it. Nix is going to end up in Angola. I think that was going to be for the murder of Frank Corso, from what I've read recently. Frank Corso was murdered Easter Sunday, 1971. But Nix does a lot of stuff behind bars that other people can't do. He orders a hit on a judge in 1987, which is Judge Vincent Sherry and his wife Margaret out of Biloxi, Mississippi. He ends up co-conspirating with Biloxi Mayor Pete Howlett for this. And it said that Pete Howlett he was an attorney, but it said that he was Nix's attorney, and he had ended up stealing stolen money from Nix. Does that make sense?
Yep.
What's interesting about him is Pete Howlett and Vincent Sherry, even though they're now a judge and a mayor, they had been law partners before that. Well, Nix was running this massive Lonely Hearts scam. It's found out along the way that he's entrusted Pete Howlett to take care of it. There's a quote from the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit, and it goes like this. While serving a life sentence for murder at Angola State Penitentiary, Nix built a criminal empire from which he hoped to earn enough money to buy his way out of prison. He dabbled in insurance fraud and drug dealing. Nix's primary money-making scheme had become a Lonely Hearts scam. Guess who he targeted?
Women?
Nope. Southern homosexual men.
Really?
Yep. Nix and his prison syndicate would place personal ads in different national, quote, homosexual magazines. And when men would respond to these ads, they would indicate, so it's not just him, it's a whole network of people with him. They would indicate that they were having financial difficulties, and if the respondent could just wire money to this person on the outside, it would get them out of a lot of trouble. So there's a guy in this named Mick Gillich, who's considered to be like one of the, quote, underworld bosses down in Biloxi. Pete Howlett, they're all involved. Pete Howlett specifically is maintaining a trust account for Nix that like all these hundreds of thousands of dollars are coming in from this scam. But in December 1986, Pete Howlett has to come to Mike Gillich and Kirstie Nix and say, $100,000 is missing. It's out of the office trust account. And I think that Vincent Sherry has done this. So at the time, coincidentally, Margaret Sherry is a Biloxi mayoral candidate critical of Mike Gillich's operations. So that's going to be on the other side of things from Pete Howlett. It's going to be very convenient if they go away. The prosecution overall produces evidence that these three men have arranged to have the Sherrys killed. In 1991, a jury is going to convict Nix, Gillick, Sherry LaRae Sharp, and John Ransom of wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It's going to end up finding Nix and Gillich guilty of travel in aid of murder for hire. But in 1994, Mike Gillich is going to become a state informant. He's going to become a rat. And in 1997, a second trial is going to get convictions against Kersey Nix, Mike Gillich, Pete Hallett, and a guy named Thomas Leslie Holcomb. Nix is going to be found guilty of racketeering, conspiracy to violate racketeering statutes, fraud, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. And he's also going to end up staying incarcerated for the rest of his... I'm pretty sure he's still incarcerated in FCI El Reno, which is Oklahoma, I think.
Right. And so that was Kersey Nix is the guy that Buford Pusser said, hey, that's who killed my wife.
Correct. So
right. And I just wanted to point out really quick, you said earlier when you started talking about this particular series of events, you were like, so Pete Hallett was stealing money from Kersey Nix that Kersey Nix had stole
from other people. Correct.
Okay. And I was going to say, and you were like, does that make sense? And I was like, yeah, that's called double crossing.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. And in this, as we go further, like it was like double crossing and then triple crossing eventually.
Yes.
Right. And so nobody can be trusted.
Yeah, you definitely do not want to have anything to do with these people. Some of them are still alive today. I'm just throwing that out there. So there's a story that runs in this thing called the Town Talk. The AP picks it up for some reason. It's down in Alexandria, Louisiana. It is, at the time, a very small paper, but it's become known for being in the midst of all of this. It is sort of around today if you look it up. But Kersey Nix, in a story there, says he had nothing to do with the ambush of Buford and Pauline. So, on January 5th of 2024, which would be more than 56 years after Pauline was killed, the TBI announced that the criminal investigation remained an active case, and they started asking for information from the public. Following several tips, the TBI confirmed that there was no autopsy on Pauline's remains during the course of the original 1967 investigation. So they put out this written statement from the TBI. By the way, it's interesting that the TBI talks about this particular case, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just throwing that out there. With the support of Pauline's family and in consultation with 25th Judicial District Attorney General Mark Davidson, the TBI has requested the exhumation of Pauline's remains. And this, they said, is in an attempt to answer critical questions, provide crucial information that may assist in the identification of the person or persons responsible for Pauline Mullen Pusser's death. So her remains are exhumed on February 8th of 2024, and they're put back in or reinterred April 7th, 2024. So August 29th, 2025, so just recently, they announce in conjunction, so that's the TBI, and the District Attorney General for the 25th Judicial District of Tennessee, they announced that if Buford Pusser were alive today, he would be charged with the death of his wife. According to investigators, they state that Pauline's wounds were not consistent with Buford's story, but rather were consistent with having been shot at close range. They said that her nose had been broken probably shortly before her death, and that the blood on Buford Pusser's car contradicted his own narrative. They also found that the wound he fought so hard to be rehabilitated from, so Buford Pusser's multiple shots to himself, was likely self-inflicted. I just want to say, I don't know that a badge could be more dirty than that. You kill your own wife in the midst of having built up this almost wrestling legend for yourself, have a movie about you, which has had multiple remakes and sequels and all kinds of nonsense. There's all sorts of songs about Buford Pusser. And I just can't imagine anything being much worse than having done this, you know?
I do know, and I realize that the way that the follow-up sort of word is makes me think that the family of Pauline Pusser may have been pushing for this.
You think?
I don't know, because it doesn't. You said like it's interesting the TBI decides to talk about this, right?
Right.
And it is. There was a narrative that was spun by one of the victims who also happened to be in law enforcement, because he's the dirty badge here. The rest of the story is kind of an offshoot.
Correct.
That's why I was like summing it up by saying, so Nix had issues.
Yeah.
There's no question. He was a prime target, right? He was an easy target for a law enforcement officer to say, hey, that dude killed my wife. I assume, based on like sort of how it made its way through media, which by the way was a completely different situation at this point, but I presume it was just somebody that he was aware of that he could blame it on, because he was shot supposedly in a vehicle when his wife was killed. He was a cop, at least at some point in his life. He was the sheriff and then the constable, and so he survived.
Correct.
Okay, and he was an eyewitness to the crime.
Correct.
This is according to his narrative, right?
Correct.
Okay.
He is the sheriff of McNairy County at the time that this happens, and he will be sheriff until the 1970 swearing in. 1970 election, he can't rerun, so when the new sheriff is sworn in, his term limits have expired for that time. He can run again after 2 years, but he can't. So from 1970 to 1972, he's not sheriff, and he doesn't end up like having a lot of luck with re-election after that. But at the time this occurs, when his wife is murdered, he is the sheriff of McNairy County, Tennessee.
And so it's obvious that nobody questioned his authority, right?
Correct. And this is a small place. Like even today, there's less than 30,000 people that live in this entire county. We should not know his name.
Right. Exactly. But he designed his career that way, right?
Yes.
I mean, you've got a semi-autobiographical. I was trying to put all this stuff together, like, because it's kind of weird the way the narrative goes. But I was trying to put it all together. So Walking Tall.
Yes.
I've never seen this.
The original movie, like that.
Yeah, I've never seen it. But it was that like after his wife was killed, I'm assuming.
Yeah. It comes out in 1973.
Okay. And so, I don't know what was going on with Pauline. Obviously, yes, he killed Pauline. It seems like that would have been painfully obvious from the beginning, which I imagine is why it gets brought up all this time later, right?
Correct.
I think that somebody was saying like, hey, or perhaps it was just Nix telling the town talk from Alexandria, Louisiana in 1990 that he had nothing to do with it, right?
Right.
I don't know. That's still what, 34 years? Because they didn't reopen it till 24.
Yeah, right. It's another 34 years, yes.
Right. So I don't know.
I think everybody always knew, but there was just no one to do anything about it.
Somebody had to say, like, and because her family supported the exhumation, right?
Yes.
And for some reason, somebody, I don't know, it doesn't go into all the details. I haven't read like the official report or anything, but somebody got a bug up their butt, right?
Correct.
And they said, hey, this is wrong. But like no new investigator, I don't think, would have come upon it without some sort of tip from somebody, right? I don't know. I don't know what happened. But I find it very interesting because I think you're absolutely right. I don't know that I've ever heard of a story with a dirtier badge than this. As far as not only did he kill his wife, he named suspects.
Right.
And then Go ahead.
I mean, so they were dirty con artists, and they were definitely into like all of the things that you think of when you think of organized crime. But Kersey Nix like wouldn't really be on the radar without people like Buford Pusser putting them on the radar.
Well, exactly. And it makes me wonder, like, did Louise Hathcock even attempt to kill him? Really?
No, it was probably a murder. That's why that was one of the things I wanted to point out here. Charles Hamilton, a murder. Louise Hathcock, a murder. All of these things are probably
And he was more than likely
90%
on
murder.
the take, right?
Oh yeah, 100% he would have been on the take, and that's how he's basically just like Kersey Nix's double crossing the double crossers. Ultimately, he would have paid off Buford to go away.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
Except he found it convenient to blame the criminals, even though to be clear, these activities are criminal activities. It's just he had a gun and a badge, right?
Right.
And this is not a novel situation as far as law enforcement through the ages, right? I mean, this happens a lot in small towns. It's absolutely insane that for me to think about, because it's logically unthinkable, except like I'm not surprised in the least, right?
Right.
Because it just doesn't make sense for you can't enforce the law while you're also breaking it. And he wasn't even trying to make a difference. He just set up an entire scenario. Now, taking it to the next level of having the movie that was sort of about him, it makes me wonder how much of that stuff, like, did he set up to have a life that was worthy to someone else of making a movie about? And that's scary. Right?
Well, it's 100% of it. His whole life is set up. Like, and I say this from the perspective that, like, we know because he told us. He went to be Buford the Bull, the wrestler. He wanted to be the center of attention and the hero.
Right. And most of the time, and this is a little bit from personal experience, when you have horrific things happen to you, most of the time, the last thing you want to do is have it be put in the spotlight.
100%.
And he just didn't seem to be that way at all, right?
Right.
And I was trying to think, like, okay, so did he plan his wife's murder, right? And my thought is, like, he may have just killed her to kill her. Like, it might not, like, to.
I think she was in his way, and she was probably pissed off because he's a giant asshole. And probably giving him what for because he was sick of being married to him. And he decided that he didn't want to ruin his story. So instead of ruin his story, he would beef up his story. I mean, at the point he does this, they have been married for almost 8 years. They've been married for almost 8 years.
And they have one child.
Yeah, they only have one kid. Dwana is her name, Dwana Pusser. I think it's her kids that are pushing for, like, the grandkids of Buford and Pauline are the.
Well, sure, or Pauline's family, like her siblings or parent, or
it could be
whatever.
Yeah,
right?
It could be. But Dwana passed away in 2018, and this all started kind of happening after that.
Okay, yeah. Well, they may have been trying to get to the bottom of
the story.
Well, because, like you said, in a small area, it's not like he fooled everybody. It's just a lot of times when you have these self-imposed, larger-than-life characters that are in positions of power, it's not that people don't know. It's just they don't say anything, right?
Right. Like, honestly, like, if you live in a small area like this, except for social settings, potentially, you really shouldn't know who the sheriff is if you're behaving yourself.
Well, and you've voted for them, right? I mean, hopefully.
Right.
But yeah, you shouldn't know anything about what's going on. But because it should just be a seamless, safe community in theory, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what you're thinking. That's the role, anyway, that but like this dude made his whole life a movie.
Luckily, karma's going to take care of most of Buford Pusser. Aside from the legend and the persona that he's built up for himself, he's not going to make it very far in life. In fact, he is going to die a couple of months shy of his 37th birthday. August 21st, 1974, he is just outside of Adamsville, Tennessee, when he crashes his specially modified Corvette in a single car accident, and he is going to die from those injuries. He had been returning home that evening from the McNairy County Fair, like the local fair, sort of end of summer fair, and he hit an embankment at a high rate of speed, and he did not have a seatbelt on, so he was ejected from the vehicle. The car crashed and burned. It was said that earlier in the day he had contracted with the production company behind Walking Tall to portray himself in the sequel to Walking Tall. I'm pretty sure he made that up, whoever he talked to, and that person just spread that rumor from that day forward. I don't think he was actually talking to them about any of that. There was speculation that like the car had been sabotaged, and it was something related to like the steering and potentially to the tie rods on the vehicle. The state trooper who responded to that accident is going to end up. So Buford Pusser became sheriff because of a car accident.
Right, exactly. That's what this sent me back to, and I wondered if they just all did this.
Well, Paul Irvin is the state trooper responding to the accident. He's going to become the sheriff of McNairy County. I even wondered if Buford Pusser killed the previous sheriff.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, exactly.
So
that made me think, like, is that what they do? They like take out the incumbent sheriff?
I think that's probably what they do. I mean, so Buford Pusser officially died because he was driving incredibly drunk with no seatbelt. There was no official autopsy done. He has this huge memorial in Adamsville, which I'm telling you, like, nobody lives in this town. Like, there's nobody even in this county. Like, there's like for him to have as big a legacy as he kind of has is ridiculous. It was said at his eulogy memorial that he had survived 7 stabbings and 8 shootings in this town of 200 people and this county of 20,000 people. And I'm just going to tell you, statistically, none of that's true.
Okay. And so he made himself this legend in his own time, right?
Yes.
Like, if you're surviving 7 stabbings and 8 shootings, like, I don't think that happens.
No, it definitely doesn't happen.
And like, why the heck are you suffering 7 stabbings and 8 shootings, right? Yeah. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. But, you know, some people inflate things just enough for them to get whatever they're trying to get out of it, right? Like, because he wanted to be like this legend in his own time, super cop, whatever you want to call it. He wanted to be the center of attention, which, by the way, I find it very odd. I haven't seen, maybe I'm wrong on this, but for this huge guy who, can, I guess, carry his own weight, and he can command the attention of a room, right?
Yeah.
It's weird for a guy like that to also be like, I need to be the center of attention. That's weird, right?
A little bit, yeah.
Especially since he had a wife and a daughter, right? That it's just strange. And maybe I'm wrong on my view of that. It just seems like he would be like the last person who would be like, oh, I want to have all the attention on me. And if he was a legit law enforcement officer that wasn't doing all these cruddy things and trying to bolster himself constantly, right? Because the only reason you say I survived 7 stabbings and 8 shootings when it is most likely not true is to make yourself be a hero, right?
Yep.
I'm a hero. I protect and serve my community, and this is how I can prove that. I've been stabbed 7 times and shot 8 times, right?
But the story probably is more like he committed multiple murders, and he orchestrated a lot of false, quote, attempts on his life, end quote.
Right, because they're, in theory, like, the garbage that was happening in the community was just that. It was garbage that, like, mafia mob crap that, I guess to some extent exists, but it's also like, why would law enforcement ever even be involved in some of that? Like moonshine running or whatever. Like, who cares? The trash takes itself out, right?
Yeah, and ultimately he did. Like a sheriff dying in a drunk driving accident in their idiotic car is about as hilariously karmic as you can get.
Well, right. And it made it seem like, the first accident that happened was some malfunction on the car of the other guy, right?
Yep.
This was some sort of, now what did it say? He was driving a Corvette that was like,
it had been modified for him.
Especially modified or something like that, which to me,
I think they just expanded some parts on it to carry his ego around with him.
Well, I was going to say, like, I bet he did the modifications.
Probably.
The other thing I wondered was, like, now what you said was interesting and possibly true. I didn't actually think about it that way, but like, as far as being an actor in the follow-up of the movie that was released about him, they were going to do a sequel to it. I thought he had overpromised something. I don't know what it could have been. And he decided that
he's going to exit.
And that would, while he wouldn't be in the movie, right?
No, he was not going to be in the movie. No way.
But he was like he was going out with a bang. If the meeting did occur, right? I'm saying like he killed himself on purpose because he overpromised whatever it was about that. That's just what I imagine happening, right? Because this guy was full of himself.
Right.
And you can get by, or at least think you're getting by to a certain extent. And then I was like, well, that must have been the thing that he overpromised on. He wouldn't be able to deliver something, right? Whatever it was. I don't know what it was, because it seemed like nobody ever questioned his authority, which is also an interesting like dynamic of these dirty badges.
Yeah.
Is just because someone isn't questioning your authority on something doesn't mean they buy your garbage.
Right.
And I would say most of the time, especially in these smaller places, and the time period, I think everybody knew he was a rotten law enforcement officer. Everybody knew he was a dirty badge. They just let him carry on for whatever reason because nobody else wanted to do it, right? But they didn't challenge him. And that doesn't mean that he had any respect whatsoever, right?
Right.
In fact, he was probably a joke, which I imagine is part of why this came up, right? Like, as far as they actually have said, if Buford Pusser was alive today, we would be charging him with his wife's murder.
You know what? If Buford Pusser were alive today, he'd probably be in charge of some section of the Tennessee State Bureau of Investigation, the TBI.
Which is really scary.
Which
right?
means it wouldn't even been looked into, so they can take that and stick it. I have a lot of issues with the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. Over the years, I have seen them do some really horrible things and be really terrible officers, and also let a lot of really terrible officers get away with shit.
Well, they're an interesting entity. They would be now. I'll just say that what I know about them. I don't know about all of it, right? But I would say that it is. It's an investigatory body that has come to light on cases.
Yes,
and they are like loudly incompetent.
Yeah.
I think is a nice way to put it. And I'm not saying all of them are, but like what has come to light in various things that I've seen, I wonder what the heck they're doing. And so it's a little alarming. I don't live in Tennessee, so I'm not all that concerned about it, but it's sort of like it makes you wonder what kind of checks and balances aren't in place, right? Because a lot of the things that have happened should not have happened, and it's crazy that they did, and then it continues on, right?
Well, and I looked this up because I wanted to say this so you could understand it. In this entire county of 20,000 people in 2024, 2,300 people voted.
And that goes along with what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like, it doesn't take much to control, like, nothing. It takes
right.
something to make a big deal out of it. So this guy, look, this is my final take on this particular person. I'm sorry to keep interrupting you. This guy made up his entire life story. He just treated people like they were his, like, you know, figurines or Barbie dolls or G.I. Joe toys or whatever toys you played with as kids. He just extended that to include real human beings.
It's really terrible.
It is. Yeah, his whole life is make-believe. You know, I've talked about, like, could there be more to it? And the truth is, because he only lived to be 36 years old, there's not. And what exists is all absolute hogwash.
Well, right, and it's all out there, right?
Yep.
Because he didn't hide anything he was doing. He just made it somebody else's fault.
Correct.
Right?
Yep.
And so all of it is very, very visible. And, you know, I bet there's an interesting story behind why the announcement was made. For one thing, that the case was, I don't know, being revisited. I don't know if it was closed or if it was just cold, but they opened it up for to investigate more in 2024, and then they came to a conclusion, right?
Yep.
And something caused that. And I'd be interested to know, based on my experience in other situations where I've seen the actions different TBI agents take and questioned, like, you know, what is happening here? I'd be interested to know how they, like, landed on that, right? But essentially, her murder went unsolved, right?
Yeah, that's a lot of resources to put into a murder that is that old. I'm not criticizing solving her murder because everyone deserves justice.
But somebody had the courage at some point, like later, much later, to speak up and say, look, we don't think that that's what happened. I do imagine it. You might be right. It might be the grandkids. It might be, you know, I think it's going to be on Pauline's side of the family if it's not, you know, Dewana's children. I don't know, like, what the line is, nor does it matter because, you know, they're innocent bystanders and all this. But it's got to be somebody who it matters to, right?
It could also be like some of these people that are accused. It could be them wanting to clear their people, like their family members.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe, and honestly, Kirksey Nix, he's still alive. He could have been the one that was like, there ain't no way that somebody tried to assassinate him in that tiny town. And he just said it, and you think about it that way, and somebody who lives in Tennessee goes, wait a second, there's only 25,000 people in all of McNairy County in 2024. Like, how many were here back then? And you get to looking and you're like, wow, there was only 4,000 people back then.
Well, and think about it. If the sheriff is, you know, stabbed 7 times, shot 8 times, like, that is probably the most dangerous place on the planet to live.
Right.
And that's just not the case, right?
Correct.
It doesn't make sense when you think of it in the grander scheme of things that is even logical. But see, he wasn't thinking that way back then. He was thinking, I'm going to make my life, like, super copped out. And that's what he was doing. And it's interesting that that's kind of where it landed, with the TBI saying, oh yeah, by the way, he killed his wife.
Well, I think if you dig into his story, I think that you probably would find that everything he did in his entire life was made up.
Exaggerated.
Yep. Yeah.
I think you're right. He was a gigantic hyperbole.
I know. It's interesting that, like, he starts out as a wrestler and then kind of becomes a real life version of a wrestler. And that is just fascinating to me, that, like, that's the way he decided to live.
It's interesting. That is not I can only imagine the turmoil, which it makes sense to me. Somebody that lives that way dying in a drunk driving accident, that makes sense because like the balls in the air that he was juggling, right?
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what you say to somebody who decides to take up a badge and then lives the way he lives his life. That is like the exact opposite of what you want to be an elected official, but also a law enforcement official.
Well, right, but he was getting away with it. And I don't know for certain that he would have been able to decipher the difference. I don't know. I have no idea how people, in fact, my coping mechanism is they just don't know the difference. They think that this is how you do life.
Yeah, I agree with that. And my last thing I'll say on this is if you want to go down a deep dive, it's better to look into like the State Line mob and this sort of Kirksey Nix, Pete Howlett, Dixie Mafia stuff, because all that you're going to find, I mean, this is now making everybody talk about it. But like realistically, please realize that if you go down a rabbit hole about this particular person being Buford Pusser, everything that you're reading that portrays him in any kind of positive superhero cop light is absolute complete fiction. He made it up.
And yes, it's a narrative that he spun. And you should take the facts of all of that stuff, the mafios, the State Line mob, whatever. And you should apply the facts to what any researcher is coming across as the narrative, because that's probably the truth of the matter, right? A lot of that stuff is garbage. A lot of it's garbage. And so any facts you find, you can rewrite it because that would be more in line with the truth. You know, you can tell just in this, like this little blurb that we just did. I mean, we're talking about at least one movie, and then there's a whole like list of music and stuff you were talking about that he inspired, right?
Yep.
He was like, his life was geared towards media before that was even a thing, right?
Yeah, he was like the law enforcement equivalent of the mid 80s televangelist.
Sort of, right, exactly. And so keeping that in mind, I mean, that's where the narrative comes from. And so it's all just fun to sell, so to speak.
Special consideration was given to True Crime Excess by LabrattiCreations.com. If you have a moment in your favorite app, please go on and give us a review or a 5-star rating. It helps us get noticed in the crowd. This is True Crime XS.
You fall like the stars. I break things like guitars. Thick skin, no scars. We're in trouble, we took it too far. I don't want to go, but it's 'cause I'll disappoint ya. It's all I've ever dreamed of, something I cannot let go of. I hate the competition, this culture's like a gym, and I lost the motivation to get fit in your expectations.
True Crime Excess is brought to you by John and Meg. It's written, produced, edited, and posted by John and Meg. You can always support True Crime Excess through Patreon.com, or if you have a story you'd like them to cover, you can reach them at TrueCrimeAccess.com. Thank you for joining us.